If I love nothing else, it's the sound of my own voice. To communicate, contribute, and connect with those around me. But I wasn't always like this. When I was younger, I liked to let other people do the talking. And one of my most frequent ventriloquists was my cousin, Antonio. Despite a pretty significant age difference, he and I spent a great deal of time together, and some of my most sacredly held values come directly from him. When I was 7, Antonio was 15, a fresh-faced sophomore with dreams of becoming a lawyer. He would regale me with stories of the crack attorneys working day and night to find the truth, to deliver justice to those who need it most. Ever since I was your age, he would say, I knew I wanted to help those who couldn't help themselves. Being older than me, he would reprimand me whenever I did wrong, but he always made sure to be fair and just. He would explain how my actions were wrong and why the punishments would help me learn to change. From extra chores to losing electronics, I was slowly shaped into the man that I am today. I respected my cousin Antonio immensely. We talked and chatted. He took me for drives to get ice cream and soda. He even taught me how to change a light bulb. I would screw it into the socket while he just sat back, spouting off pithy sayings. The one that always stuck out to me actually ended up being his senior year quote. It was, "Darkness is merely the absence of light, and silence is merely the absence of me." He thought himself quite the jokester. He would spend all day at my house practicing jokes while his dad was at work. He actually lived pretty close, just down the road, but my mom would never let me visit. Every single time I asked, she would just say the same thing. You need to stay away from Uncle Patrick. Uncle Patrick? My uncle, her brother, Antonio's dad. Now, I didn't really get it at the time, but being so young, my mother's word was gospel, so I obeyed. You see, my parents had me pretty late in life, and back in their day, you didn't really talk about these things. You stayed silent. It was better to let things happen and keep up appearances than it was to let anybody know that your family wasn't perfect. They say that justice is blind, but when it came to family matters, they meant that literally. Now, despite all of this, Antonio and I stayed very close until just after my 14th birthday. He graduated from our hometown high school and was preparing to ship off to graduate school. He was finally doing it, on the fast track to becoming a real-life lawyer. The night before his flight left, he took me on one last drive and told me his story. His trauma, his tragedy, and Uncle Patrick. I sat and listened and cried with him, but he assured me that his past was behind him and that he had only the future to look forward to. Well, time passed and the future came. I was a sophomore in high school myself now. Growing older, I considered myself wiser and more capable of deciding things for myself, like deciding what was right. I came home one day and asked my mom why no one had done anything about Uncle Patrick, but she told me that it wasn't quite so easy. Growing up in such a small town, he was well known and well respected, and even if Antonio came forward himself, it might not be enough. I was troubled, to say the least. What use was justice if it couldn't do anything? If we never got the chance to see it done? I went to my room and thought about it, and eventually convinced myself that maybe Antonio was becoming a lawyer so that he could do the one thing the rest of my family never could: break the silence. Or could he? From the moment I could put it into words, justice has been nebulous and indistinct. I had always grown up thinking that justice meant getting what you're owed, whether that was some reward for a life well lived or some punishment for a wrong you never righted. But who draws these lines? Traditionally, the criminal justice system ensures that the worst of our society serves time for their crimes, but how much time is enough? Is serving time ever enough? Questions like this plagued me for the better part of that year, as I wondered how Antonio's formal education would help him understand these things better than anyone in the world. He would come back and share all the secrets to life and justice he'd uncovered. He had to. And he did. The school year ended and Antonio came home for the summer. I was enrolled in a summer program and Antonio offered to watch me while my parents went on a trip. Things went well. For a while. But eventually, Antonio decided that he needed closure. July 17th, 2015. He went to go visit his dad, my Uncle Patrick. I waited at home, nervously counting the minutes because, frankly, I didn't know what was going to happen. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, he came home. I could tell he'd been crying, and I tried to comfort him, but he told me that he needed to be alone. And I wish I hadn't listened, because later that night, as I left my room to get some water, I passed the bathroom and I was just assaulted by the overwhelming stench of alcohol. Antonio wasn't a drinker. I knew that something was wrong. So I knocked on the bathroom door. I just knocked, and I never got an answer. I called out his name. I begged. I pleaded for any sort of response, and I didn't hear anything. So eventually, I just got fed up, and I tried the door handle, and it wasn't locked, and I swung it open, and I found him. I tried everything I knew I could try. I called an ambulance and I started CPR, and I just kept trying until I just couldn't anymore. Eventually, I just laid back and sat there in silence. The note that he left inspired the rest of my family to finally speak up. Even though he never got the chance to see it, justice was finally done. My uncle is currently in the midst of a 22-year prison sentence. Last I heard, he was placed into protective custody because when the other prisoners learned what he'd done, they tried to enact their own form of justice on him. Out here in the real world, however, justice isn't something that grows on trees or falls from the sky. It's something that we have to work toward every single day of our lives. Justice and its presence in my life have shaped me into the man that I am today. Even so, I cannot say with any certainty that I have ever truly understood what justice means. Can we truly say that Antonio got the justice that he deserved? What about Uncle Patrick? Justice is nuanced and not always clear, even to the ones left to pick up the pieces. So I ask, will you face your silence. All it takes is a whisper, a deafening realization that maybe justice just is.